Welcome to Midnight Index. Today, we journey deep into one of Russia's most unsettling outdoor mysteries, the Khamar Daban incident. In August of 1993, a hiking group from Kazakhstan ventured into the rugged mountains near Siberia's Lake Baikal. They expected adventure and achievement, but what they encountered was an unspeakable tragedy. 6 hikers perished inexplicably, leaving behind a lone survivor whose chilling account raises more questions than answers. Often overshadowed by the Dyatlov Pass incident, this story is equally eerie, filled with contradictions, suspicious circumstances, and theories ranging from hypothermia to sinister chemical experiments. But what really happened on that fateful expedition? Now, let's flip through the index. 1. The final expedition. Our story begins in the quiet town of Petropavl, Kazakhstan, where 7 enthusiastic hikers from the Azimuth Touring Club prepared for what they believed would be the trek of a lifetime. Led by 41-year-old Lyudmila Korovina, a seasoned outdoorswoman and USSR-recognized master of sports, the team had meticulously planned their ambitious expedition through Siberia's Khamar Daban mountain range. Lyudmila's leadership was well respected, her skills trusted implicitly, and her passion contagious. Joining Lyudmila were 6 young, spirited hikers. Alexander Kirsan, 23. Known affectionately as Sasha. Tatiana Filipenko, 24. Whose lively optimism lifted group morale. Denis Shwachkin, 19. A quiet but determined trekker. Valentina Yutoshenko, 17. Resilient and observant. Victoria Zalasova, 16. Eager and adventurous. And Timur Babanov, the youngest at just 15. Full of energy and curiosity. They each brought youthful enthusiasm and trust in Lyudmila's expertise, confidence that was about to be severely tested. The group's journey was part of Turiada, a popular Soviet tradition of mass hiking expeditions. Their meticulously planned route would take them from the small station at Marino near picturesque Lake Baikal, up through Langataysky Pass, onward along the ridges to Khan Ula Peak at 2,371 meters, then to the Yagelny Golets, followed by a trek over Peak 2,310, commonly called Retranslator Peak. Finally, they would descend toward the serene banks of the Sneznaya River, pass by the secluded Potovoy Lake, and finish in the village of Utulak. But nature often defies even the most careful plans. Despite the detailed route and the careful timing set by Lyudmila, Mother Nature soon showed the group that she had her own agenda. As they set out from Marino on August 4, 1993, clouds gathered ominously overhead. They encountered rain, biting winds, and temperatures plummeting below freezing, conditions starkly different from what had been forecasted. Undeterred, the group pressed on, determined to conquer their path. Against the odds, they reached their initial summit goal without incident. Spirits were high. Laughter echoed through the rugged terrain. And despite the challenging weather, their camaraderie remained strong. But it was during their descent, on the morning of August 5, that their adventure turned abruptly into a nightmare. According to Valentina Yutoshenko, the sole survivor, the tragedy began shortly after breakfast. The group had barely started down the mountain when Alexander, trailing slightly behind, suddenly cried out in agony. Turning quickly, the group witnessed a horrifying scene. Alexander was convulsing violently, foam dripping from his mouth, blood streaming from his eyes and ears. Frozen with shock, the hikers watched helplessly as their friend collapsed, his body finally going still on the cold, rocky ground. Panic ensued. Lyudmila rushed to Alexander's aid, instructing the others urgently to move ahead and seek help. But within moments, Lyudmila herself collapsed, her symptoms horrifyingly similar to Alexander's. Before the hikers could even process their leader's fate, Tatiana began choking, desperately clawing at her throat as if unable to breathe. In a state of blind panic, she smashed her head against nearby rocks. Terrified, the others tried to run. But one by one, they succumbed rapidly to the same agonizing symptoms, falling lifelessly onto the frigid ground. Valentina, consumed by terror yet untouched by whatever had ravaged her friends, fled alone down the mountainside. Expecting to collapse any second, she waited at the tree line for death. But death never came. After gathering courage, she returned cautiously to the tragic scene, only to find her worst fears confirmed. All of her friends lay motionless, their bodies grotesquely silent. For 4 days, Valentina trudged along power lines, surviving off scraps of supplies, until she was finally found by a group of kayakers. They were stunned to encounter a bloodied, disoriented girl wandering through the wilderness, mumbling incoherently about death and horror. Valentina's rescue marked only the beginning of a deeper mystery. The world soon learned of the horrific demise of the Khamar Daban hikers. But understanding exactly what happened remains elusive to this day. How could 7 experienced, prepared hikers succumb so quickly and violently? And why did Valentina survive, untouched by the deadly force that claimed the others? Could it have been something as simple as the harshness of Siberian weather? Or was there a more sinister cause lurking in those mountains? As we venture further into this eerie tale, we'll explore theories, discrepancies, and chilling parallels to other infamous wilderness mysteries. But for now, let one haunting question linger. What truly happened on that mountain? 2. The lone survivor's account. In any great mystery, the voice of a lone survivor becomes the thread that ties fragmented truths together. Valentina Yutoshenko, just 17 years old at the time, bore the crushing weight of that role. Her testimony, both harrowing and confusing, remains the cornerstone of everything we know about the Khamar Daban tragedy. When Valentina stumbled into the kayakers' camp 4 days after the catastrophe, she was a vision straight from a nightmare. Covered in blood, clothes shredded, her eyes wide and unseeing. She could barely speak. Some say she was screaming incoherently. Others report she was eerily silent, staring through the rescuers as if trapped between 2 realities. Upon reaching the authorities, Valentina gave her first official statement. According to this early account, the group had awoken to relatively normal conditions on the morning of August 5. They ate breakfast, packed up camp, and began their descent. Nothing seemed amiss, no strange smells, no suspicious food, no indication that anything was wrong. Yet almost immediately after breaking camp, Alexander's sudden and violent symptoms broke the morning's peace. Valentina recalled the sheer horror. Alexander clutching his throat, his body convulsing, blood pouring from his mouth, ears, and eyes. The group's initial response was pure instinct. Ludmila ran to help, ordering the others to go for assistance. But then Ludmila collapsed too, exhibiting the same grotesque symptoms. Chaos reigned. Tatiana's desperate attempts to help only led to her own horrifying demise. The remaining 4, in complete terror, tried to flee. Valentina described how one by one, each of her companions staggered, collapsed, and died in agony. Victoria, Timur, Dennis, none were spared. But Valentina herself never succumbed. Why? Was it distance? Timing? Luck? One chilling detail emerges when analyzing her account. Valentina was reportedly furthest from the initial site where Alexander collapsed. Perhaps, if some environmental toxin was involved, she simply wasn't exposed long enough to its effects. Or perhaps her natural instincts led her to move quickly enough to avoid the worst. After her initial escape down the mountainside, Valentina spent hours sheltering near the tree line, paralyzed by fear. She expected every breath to be her last. When death didn't come, she bravely returned to check on her friends. Finding their corpses cold and silent, she scavenged supplies, mainly food and clothing, and set off into the wilderness, following power lines she had seen during their ascent. During those 4 days, Valentina faced exposure, dehydration, and the creeping terror that whatever force had killed her friends might yet claim her too. Her survival instinct guided her, step after step, mile after mile, until human kindness finally intervened. Yet Valentina's story isn't without controversy. In interviews years later, inconsistencies appeared. Certain details she provided to authorities in 1993 do not align perfectly with her 2018 recollections. The reasons for this could be many. Trauma, time's distortion of memory, or simply the human mind's desperate attempt to reshape unbearable truths. But it raises troubling questions. Could Valentina's altered memories obscure the real cause? Or was she trying to protect herself, or someone else, from darker realities? Her words, fragile as gossamer, are the only map we have to navigate the chilling labyrinth of the Khamar Daban disaster. Would you trust the shifting sands of memory in unraveling such a grim tale? Or do you believe that somewhere between the spoken and the forgotten lies the key to the truth? 3. Autopsy mysteries. After Valentina's rescue, attention swiftly turned to the mountains. Rescue teams were dispatched to the site where Valentina said her companions had fallen. Navigating harsh terrain and unpredictable weather, it took nearly 2 weeks to recover the bodies. What they found only deepened the mystery. The corpses were in various states of decomposition, worsened by the rain and wild animals. Yet even through the deterioration, certain horrifying details stood out. Many bodies bore signs of massive internal trauma, but little external injury. There were broken bones, unexplained bruising, and what one investigator described as widespread hemorrhaging. Medical examiners were baffled. The autopsy reports listed various causes of death, none fully satisfying. Ludmila Korovina, the leader, was ruled to have died of cardiac arrest. The others reportedly died from hypothermia and protein deficiency. An odd conclusion given the relatively short time they had been missing. But these diagnoses didn't sit right. How does hypothermia cause foaming at the mouth, bleeding from the eyes and ears, violent thrashing, and rapid death within minutes? Would a well-fed, well-prepared group show signs of protein starvation after just days into a planned trek? The answer, most experts agree, is no. Worse yet, the autopsies reportedly found fluid buildup in the lungs of multiple victims, a sign often associated with pulmonary edema. In the mountains, pulmonary edema can sometimes occur due to rapid ascents causing altitude sickness. But the group was acclimated. Their ascent was gradual, and Korovina's meticulous planning accounted for altitude risks. Why, then, did the hikers exhibit signs of pulmonary trauma? Some have suggested environmental poisoning, exposure to nerve agents, or unknown toxins. Others point to possible acute stress reactions or sudden shock. Still, no definitive toxicology screening was ever publicly reported. And so, as with Dyatlov past decades before, the authorities settled on a familiar refrain: hypothermia. A tidy, simple answer for an untidy, gruesome event. But was it the truth? Or was the real cause buried under the snow, like so many secrets in the Siberian wilderness? When the evidence defies explanation, what do we trust, the bodies, the survivor, or the silence? 5. The nerve agent theory. Among the many unsettling theories proposed to explain the deaths at Khamar Daban, one stands out for its chilling plausibility: nerve agent exposure. The symptoms described by Valentina, foaming at the mouth, bleeding from the eyes and ears, violent convulsions, are textbook signs of certain chemical nerve agents. Sarin, VX, Novichok. All capable of wreaking swift, gruesome havoc on the human body. Nerve agents disrupt the nervous system, causing muscles to seize, glands to hypersecrete, and the body's internal signaling to fail catastrophically. Victims often foam at the mouth, suffer internal bleeding, experience involuntary convulsions, and die quickly if untreated. Given the evidence, the nerve agent hypothesis seems disturbingly fitting. But where would such a deadly compound come from in the remote Siberian wilderness? The answer may lie in Cold War history. During the Soviet era, vast swaths of Siberia were designated for secret military activities. Weapons testing, chemical dumps, research facilities buried in remote mountains where prying eyes couldn't reach. Lake Baikal and its surrounding areas, where the hikers ventured, were no exception. Could a decades-old nerve agent cache, forgotten by history, have contaminated the soil or water? Rain and heavy winds, battering the Khamar Daban mountains during the expedition, could have unearthed dormant chemical agents. A single inhalation, a single touch, enough to trigger the violent deaths witnessed by Valentina. There's precedent. In other parts of the former Soviet Union, abandoned chemical stockpiles have been discovered decades later, posing grave threats to nearby populations. The theory gains even more traction considering one horrifying detail. Valentina was physically farther from Alexander when he first collapsed. If a nerve agent plume drifted from disturbed ground, proximity would determine exposure. Those nearest, Alexander, Ludmila, Tatiana, died first. Those attempting to flee were struck down next. Valentina, quickest to retreat, may have narrowly escaped lethal contact. But problems with the nerve agent theory persist. No environmental testing was ever made public. No soil samples. No water analysis. No toxicology reports confirming chemical agents in the victims' bodies. If Soviet-era nerve agents were involved, would Russian authorities admit it? History suggests not. Secrecy ran deep. Admissions of wrongdoing were rare, especially when Cold War relics were concerned. Still, in the absence of public forensic evidence, the nerve agent hypothesis remains just that, a hypothesis. An unsettling, haunting possibility. If the mountains themselves carried a deadly legacy, dormant and unseen, what other forgotten dangers might lie buried across the Siberian wilderness? And if deadly secrets from the past can still kill decades later, how many more tragedies are simply waiting for the wrong footsteps to stir them awake? 6. The official hypothermia theory, and why it doesn't add up. In cases as chilling and bizarre as the Khamar Daban tragedy, authorities often look for the simplest explanation. And so, it was officially concluded that the 6 hikers died from hypothermia and exhaustion. At first glance, it sounds plausible. The group faced freezing rain, punishing winds, and plunging temperatures despite it being August. The Siberian wilderness is notoriously unforgiving, and even experienced hikers can fall victim to the elements. But the symptoms Valentina described don't match classic hypothermia. In true hypothermia, the body gradually cools. Victims shiver violently, then less and less as their core temperature drops. Muscles stiffen. Coordination fails. Thought processes slow, leading to confusion, irrational behavior, and finally unconsciousness. Hypothermia is a cruel thief, but it works slowly. The hikers of Khamar Daban didn't die slowly. They died violently. Within minutes. Foaming at the mouth, bleeding from the orifices, thrashing in agony, none of these are signs of hypothermia. Nor does hypothermia typically cause pulmonary edema. Some proponents of the official theory argue that panic or injuries could have exacerbated the hypothermic process. A group descending into madness, injuring themselves, then succumbing to the cold. But again, the timeline betrays this idea. Valentina recalled the symptoms manifesting during breakfast, after a night of rest. If hypothermia had set in overnight, their confusion and physical degradation would have been evident then, not suddenly upon waking. Moreover, the group was well prepared. They had proper clothing, food supplies, and a meticulously planned route. Ludmila Korovina, the leader, had decades of mountain experience. She had led dozens of expeditions without incident. Would she have allowed her team to slip quietly into hypothermic deaths without recognizing the danger? Unlikely. Skeptics also point to the protein deficiency found during autopsies. Authorities suggested that prolonged exertion without adequate food weakened the hikers' bodies. But the group had been hiking for only a few days. Severe protein depletion requires extended periods of starvation, not mere days. Was this protein deficiency truly a factor? Or was it misinterpreted muscle breakdown from some other cause, such as nerve agent poisoning? Without original medical reports made public, we may never know. But what remains clear is this. The official explanation wraps the horror of Khamar Daban in a neat package, but it leaves dozens of facts awkwardly protruding, sharp as bones under thin ice. In mysteries, simple answers are often the first refuge of fear. But when fear crafts the story, is the real truth buried even deeper beneath the snow? Would you trust the neatness of the official report, or listen instead to the ragged, terrified voice of survival? 7. The shadow of Dyatlov Pass, eerie parallels and differences. Long before the tragedy at Khamar Daban, another group of hikers vanished in the frozen wilderness of Russia. The year was 1959. The location: the Ural Mountains. The event: the Dyatlov Pass incident. 9 experienced hikers. A violent and unexplained end. The similarities between Dyatlov and Khamar Daban are chilling. Both involve small groups of young, capable hikers. Both occurred in remote, harsh mountainous terrains. Both resulted in deaths that official explanations, hypothermia, exhaustion, failed to fully explain. And most hauntingly, both incidents left behind only a single living witness. At Dyatlov, Yuri Yudin survived by leaving the group early due to illness. At Khamar Daban, Valentina Yudashenko survived by sheer chance. But beneath the surface, key differences emerge. In Dyatlov, the hiker's tent was found slashed open from the inside. They fled into the snow barefoot, half-dressed, in lethal temperatures. Autopsies revealed massive internal injuries, crushed skulls, broken ribs, a missing tongue. And yet, minimal external wounds. At Khamar Daban, there was no evidence of struggle. No fleeing in terror. No mysterious tent. Instead, death came suddenly, violently, in daylight. Another difference. Timeline. The Dyatlov hikers likely perished over several hours, succumbing gradually to exposure. The Khamar Daban group died within minutes. Then, there is the issue of external injuries. In Dyatlov, the injuries were catastrophic, akin to car crashes, yet without corresponding external trauma. At Khamar Daban, bruising and internal hemorrhaging were present, but no crushing wounds. Both cases confuse medical logic. Both defy tidy narrative closure. Both hint at something unseen, something lurking beyond our current understanding. In Dyatlov's case, modern theories range from avalanches to infrasound-induced panic. In Khamar Daban, theories tilt toward chemical exposure. Yet the similarities nag at us. Is there a deeper pattern? A hidden force in Russia's wilderness, preying upon even the most prepared adventurers? Could it be environmental? Geological? Governmental? Or are these tragedies simply cruel coincidences, bound only by the human need to find meaning in chaos? When nature conspires to kill, does it leave behind a signature? Or only a void, cold and unanswering, as endless as the Siberian night? 8. Theories beyond the obvious, stranger possibilities. When all logical explanations unravel, the human mind drifts toward stranger shores. And the Khamar Daban tragedy, steeped in contradictions and silence, invites the strangest possibilities. Some suggest that the hikers were unwitting victims of secret military experiments. Given Siberia's Cold War history, it's not implausible. The mountains and forests around Lake Baikal were notorious sites for hidden military installations. Weapons testing, chemical storage, biological experimentation. Could a forgotten payload of toxic material have been disturbed by the hikers? Or, more disturbingly, could an active experiment have gone wrong? There's also the theory of natural gas release. In remote mountain regions, gas pockets can rupture suddenly, releasing deadly concentrations of carbon monoxide or hydrogen sulfide. Such gases can cause confusion, hemorrhaging, and rapid death if inhaled in high doses. A freak geological event, invisible and odorless, could have swept through their camp. Those closest to the fissure, Alexander, Ludmila, Tatiana, would have died almost instantly. Those farther away, like Valentina, might have escaped exposure. But if a gas release occurred, why was there no mention of dead wildlife? No evidence of geological disturbance? Another eerie theory surfaces. Infrasonic sound. Under certain atmospheric conditions, wind moving across mountains can produce low-frequency sounds, inaudible to human ears, but capable of inducing panic, nausea, and disorientation. Could a perfect storm of weather and terrain have created an invisible wave of fear and confusion, driving the hikers to madness? Skeptics point out, however, that infrasonic sound is not known to cause bleeding. Nor would it explain the suddenness and violence of their deaths. Then there are those who venture into even darker waters. Whispers of encounters with something unnatural. A hidden predator. An unknown environmental phenomenon. Even ancient forces tied to the deep, wild soul of Siberia. Though these theories tip into the fantastical, they arise from one unignorable fact. Something happened on that mountain. Something sudden, catastrophic, and largely invisible. No theory, scientific, military, supernatural, fits perfectly. Each explains some aspects, but leaves others gaping open, like wounds. And so the Khamar Daban incident lingers at the edge of human understanding, teasing the mind, mocking neat conclusions. It forces a question that echoes long after the last campfire has burned out. Are there still forces on this earth, ancient or modern, seen or unseen, that can erase human life without leaving a trace? 9. An open-ended legacy, what Khamar Daban leaves behind. Today, more than 3 decades later, the Khamar Daban incident remains shrouded in mystery. Unlike more publicized cases, like the Dyatlov Pass, it lurks quietly in the shadowed corners of unsolved history. Whispered about, rarely discussed in mainstream accounts. And yet, it demands attention. The deaths of Alexander, Tatiana, Denis, Victoria, Timur, and their leader Ludmila Korovina were not isolated tragedies. They were violent, rapid, and unexplained. The survivor, Valentina, carries a burden few can comprehend. Her memory, the only living thread, has frayed and shifted with time. And without public access to full autopsy reports, toxicology findings, or forensic data, the true cause remains beyond reach. Speculation fills the vacuum. Chemical agents, natural gas, psychological breakdowns, supernatural phenomena. Each theory reflects a deeper need. The need for explanation. The need to believe that such horrific chaos must have a cause, however dark. But maybe, just maybe, some events resist understanding. Maybe the wilderness still holds places where human life can be snuffed out without warning, leaving behind only riddles. In the end, the Khamar Daban incident reminds us of something primal. That even with all our preparation, all our expertise, we remain fragile against the forces of nature, or forces we barely comprehend. The next time you plan a journey into the wild, think of Ludmila and her young hikers. Think of their optimism, their excitement, their trust in skill and planning. And remember how quickly it can all unravel. Not with a roar, not with a warning, but with a silent, unseen force, sweeping life away in an instant. As we close this chapter, one question still haunts the Khamar Daban peaks. What really happened that August day in 1993? And will we ever know? That closes the file. Thanks for listening to Midnight Index. If you enjoyed this content, consider liking, subscribing, and maybe commenting. Thanks.